Okay. Well, welcome everyone to Show and Tell Equity and Justice in Early Care and Education. This is the third installment of our Show and Tell series on equity and justice in early childhood. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Vance Lewis. I'm a senior program manager with Promise Venture Studio and a former special education teacher and administrator. I'm thrilled to be joined today by my colleague, Show+Tell, entrepreneur in residence at Promise.
Hi, everyone. I'm Show+Tell, and I'm really excited to be here with you all today. Before we get into it, I want you to introduce yourself in that chat box. Go ahead and write your name, your organization, and where you're zooming in from today. We've got a great show and tell lined up for you today on a topic that is deeply personal to me as a lifelong educator and as a mother of two Black sons. My journey as an educator began when I taught 7th grade in Philadelphia. I witnessed firsthand the compounding effects of years of educational inequity, unjust disciplinary practices, and the inequitable access to resources due to systemic racism had on children, and more specifically, children who identify as Black, Indigenous, people of color. However, it wasn't until I had my own children that it dawned on me that education equity starts much earlier than I could have ever imagined. As a brand new parent who was working full-time while also going to school in the evening to earn my PhD, I relied heavily on care outside my home. However, in the process of looking for a high-quality learning environment for my children, I was dismayed at what I found. First, there was simply a lack of high-quality options available. Wait lists were sometimes as long as 2 years. When I did find a space for my children, I remained confused as to why tuition was so high, but the teachers who were predominantly women of color were paid so little. It was these challenges and others that fueled me to create Rise Child Development Center, Inc., a 501c3 anti-racist organization created to dismantle inequities in early childhood education. Later in the program, you'll hear more about Rise, but I'm inspired by the fact that there are other people and organizations joining me in the fight to reimagine early childhood education. What is even more exciting is that you will have the opportunity to hear from 16 amazing presenters that are also committed to dismantling systemic racism and ECE.
So today's event is part of our Show and Tell series on equity and justice in early childhood. Today, we're focused on the infant, toddler, and preschool age stages. This is a continuation of our Show and Tell event 2 weeks ago on birth equity and justice, which covered the perinatal stage. And we will be hosting a funder-only Show and Tell debrief on August 17th. And there'll be additional venture deep dives throughout the rest of the year. So please stay tuned. Today's event is going to be split up into 4 different sections. We'll kick off with organizations with a strong focus on racial equity, covering topics such as equitable classroom quality assessments, anti-racist professional development, and authentic family engagement. Next, we'll shift to cultural and linguistic equity, covering topics such as celebrating linguistic differences, honoring cultural traditions, and equitably supporting dual language learners in classrooms. After that, we'll shift to organizations focused on improving compensation and working conditions of the ECE workforce, which we know is primarily women of color. We'll then move on to organizations taking innovative 2-gen approaches to advancing equity and justice in early childhood. And lastly, we'll close with a live interview with Dr. Walter Gilliam and Tina Sloan on ending unjust disciplinary practices. This framework provides us a way to section today's event, but the work of those featured cuts across multiple of these themes and topics. So while we may feature one organization in the compensation of the ECE workforce section, for example, that organization is certainly doing work to advance racial equity, given the composition of the ECE workforce. Similarly, cultural and linguistic equity, racial equity, and innovative 2-gen solutions are intersecting and complementary themes. Before we dive in, I do want to take a moment and thank our supporters in this work. Without your support, feedback, and thought partnership, today would not have been possible. And a big, big thank you to all of you for taking time out of your day to hear from this incredible lineup of innovators and social entrepreneurs advancing equity and justice in early care and education.
For some of you in the audience, this might be your 6th time attending Promise's Show and Tell event. For others, it might be your first. So let me take a moment to recap what Show and Tell sets out to accomplish. First, we strove to bring together a diverse national community of current and potential investors and funders of early childhood initiatives. Second, we want to frame some of the most important topics in early childhood by bringing together the perspectives of experts from across the field. And finally, and most importantly, we want to create a forum for connection, support, and ongoing collaboration between today's presenters and each of you. We're intentionally designed Show and Tell to catalyze connections. Now we rely on your deliberate engagement, curiosity, and definitely generosity.
All the presentations today are short to help you get an overview of many great organizations and leaders in one event. Think of each presentation today as an opportunity to open a door and begin building a relationship. After each presentation, you'll see a poll pop up on your screen, kind of like this. Okay, great. See a lot of people saying that they, yes, definitely are going to use the poll. A couple people using the post-event website. That is perfect. Let's see, got like 150 or so folks saying that they'll connect, which is awesome. So the polls will ask if you want to connect with the speaker, or if you're able to make a connection for the speaker. If you say yes, we'll share your email with them and they'll follow up with you. We'll also send you an email with more information about all the organizations you opt in to connect with today. Some organizations are looking for funding to catalyze their work or introductions to potential partners. For each, we hope you'll be inspired by their work and opt into supporting them by connecting or making an introduction for them.
We'll move quickly. So to keep you oriented, we encourage you to follow along to this website. You can also opt in to connect at that website, share questions or ideas for the speaker, or share feedback on their presentation. All of these ways of connection are an opportunity to increase the collective impact of our community. I ask and challenge everyone today to think about what you can give through this forum, whether it's an introduction, a partnership proposal, an investment, or constructive feedback. You'll also have access to these materials later through the same website. And if those connection forums will stay open, so if something resonates later, you can always go back and connect.
Prior to hearing from our first presenter, we feel it's important to ground everyone in shared definitions of topics and terms you'll hear about today. So first, institutional racism. This is a system in which public policies, institutional practices, cultural representations, and other norms perpetuate racial oppression, uphold white supremacy, and serve to the systemic detriment and harm of Black, Indigenous, people of color. Anti-racism is the active process of identifying and challenging racism by changing systems, organizational structures, policies and practices, and attitudes to redistribute power in an equitable manner.
Anti-racism is necessary in achieving racial equity and racial justice. Racial equity occurs when race is no longer a predictor of outcomes in ECE, leading to more just outcomes in policy, practices, attitudes, and cultural messages. Racial justice is the proactive process of reinforcing and establishing policies and practices that produce equitable power, access, opportunities, and outcomes across ECE for all children, families, and communities impacted by racism. The goal, however, is to not only eradicate racism, but also the presence of deliberate social systems and structures that sustain racial equity through proactive and preventative measures.
Awesome. So now that we all have a shared understanding of key terms, I think we're ready to get started, Show+Tell.
I think we are. And I'm excited to introduce our first presenters, Dr. Ioma Iruka from the Equity Research Action Coalition, and Simare James, who is the interim president and CEO of the National Black Child Development Institute. We are going to hear about how they're combating anti-Blackness and institutional racism through the National Agenda for Black Children. Let's hear from them.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ioma Iruka, and I'm ecstatic to be chatting with you all about how you can get involved in the National Agenda for Black Children. And I'm joined by my friend, a co-conspirator, Madam President Simare James. So Simare, tell us about yourself and what you are doing over there with the National Black Child Development Institute.
Thank you so much. And it's wonderful, again, my friend and colleague, Ioma, to be sharing this agenda for Black children with you. So, again, I am from the National Black Child Development Institute. I'm the interim president and CEO. Honored to serve in that leadership role. As a quick way to encapsulate and summarize the National Black Child Development Institute, we are committed to the message and the progress on the idea that being Black is not a risk factor. And we promote this message to individuals, to Black communities, to Black children, because we need folks to know that the data and the outcomes that you hear about Black children is not indicative of their identities, is not indicative of our culture. That data is driven by societal issues that we have to address. And so in addition to programs designed to support Black children on the individual level, we also have our policy initiatives that are about changing systems and addressing racism in systems so that we don't continue to identify policy solutions that are designed to fix Black families without fixing historical oppression and without addressing institutional racism. Ioma, our work really aligns, though, and complements each other. Please tell us more about the Equity Research Action Coalition.
Of course, I'll give you a little snippet. So the Equity Research Action Coalition is one that I just started at UNC Chapel Hill in October of 2020. It is a university-based collaborative that works at the intersection of research, program, and policy. And we really work and walk in collaboration with MBCDI and other practice and policy organizations that are again focusing on eradicating racism and other oppressive systems and ensuring that our cultural wealth is centered in all matters of research and data-driven policy.
And you and I just a few months ago had a conversation that has led to this moment, talking about the agenda for Black children. And we had 3 Ps. What are the 3 Ps?
So yes, I know my 3 Ps, and not the Ps like the green can stuff, but really it's about this whole idea of the national agenda for Black children that we, meaning me, with the Equity Research Action Coalition and the National Black Child Development Institute, Samira and her team, and another colleague from Points of Access, will be releasing it sometime this fall. And the whole idea is to really set the priorities that everyone should shout when talking and thinking about Black Lives Matter. We want people to be able to call for specific policies that really matter for Black children and families in our communities. We don't just want performance, we want things to be institutionalized, embedded in the policies. And so this agenda will provide a Black print for every community in the country, from Los Angeles, California, to Atlanta, Georgia, to Newark, New Jersey. And the whole idea of the 3 pieces about how do we protect our children and families from racism and discrimination, how do we promote our economic security, health, and access to education, and how do we preserve our cultural identity, our language, and positive racial identity.
And our NBCDI's role in partnering around this agenda will be multifaceted, right? We develop programs, we're expanding those programs that are about that positive racial identity. We have policy initiatives that are designed to change systems and protect Black children from discriminative practices like suspensions and expulsions that impact our children at higher rates starting at 2 and 3 years old. And so NBCDI will be right there.
Under a part of our national agenda, one of the 3 Ps is called preservation, or preserving young children's cultural heritage and identity. And part of that we want to kind of focus on with the policies is to make sure that the policies ensure pay parity. We know that a lot of our educators are actually paid less. Our Black educators are paid less than their white counterparts, 78 cents to the dollar. So we want to make sure that we have policies that ensure pay parities. The second thing is we want to make sure that our Black children are exposed to Black teachers. They're also exposed to sort of African-centered culture responsive practices that lean on our history, that lean on our language, the way that we move, the way that we think, right? And also one of the policies also make sure that children are accessing anti-racist teaching practices that don't get them kicked out of the classroom from suspension expulsion issues, right? That make sure the images of their best selves is in the classroom, that they're represented in the books, in the curricula, in every part of their day, that they are reminded how brilliant and how gifted they are. So we're hoping that our agenda with the research and all the work that NBCI does in terms of programming and policy will push the agenda forward. And for those who really care about Black children and families and educators, will make sure that they understand the policies they were pushing for under those 3 Ps. So now it's my turn to ask you a little bit of questions, Marie. So, why is it important that everyone gets involved with the national agenda for Black children? And how can people stay connected with what you all are doing also at NBCDI beyond the national agenda?
Well, we actually can't do this alone. This is the work of really changing the narrative about Black children, but also changing the reality for Black children and families is work that is at the national level, and it takes everyone in our communities. And so we want anyone watching this, you have a role. We want to ensure that you learn. And in the few minutes that we've been with you, there's so much more that we want to give you. It's NBCDI's 50th anniversary, and we want you to join us for our 50th anniversary conference. Please visit our conference website where you actually will have a discounted registration if you put in the code PARTNER. So again, we want to build a relationship with you. We want you to stay in touch with us and continue this work alongside us. So just like me and Ioma are partners, become a partner, attend our conference, code PARTNER with a capital A, all lowercase, capital A. And we look forward to seeing you there.
Yes, and as somebody who actually has attended the annual conference in person, usually, which I can't wait till is in person again, it is a must go to conference, not just because, of course, you talk about Black children, families, educators, and leaders, but because it just gives you this sense of community, this sense of peace and spirituality that you also don't get in a conference. So I would say, wherever you can however you can engage with NBCDI, but also come to the conference, I would encourage you to bring not just, your friends, but bring your colleagues, both Black, white, Latino, Asian, all the above, because in the end of it, it's not about for those who sort of tweeted or put out a statement about Black Lives Matter. This is one way you can really make sure that Black lives do matter by engaging in not just words, but also in the work. And the conference is a great way to really engage in the work and understand how you can contribute to the development of Black children and all those who work on behalf of them. So I hope you stay connected to the conference and obviously also stay connected to the coalition work that we are doing in the fight for justice for our Black community, especially our babies. So I'm so thrilled to be here, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much to Promise Ventures.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing more about NBCDI, Dr. Aruka and Timere. Everything you shared resonated with me, especially as a mother of Black sons. I really loved the 3 Ps: protect, promote, preserve. I definitely plan on attending the 50th anniversary conference, and I hope all of you listening in today are able to make it as well. If you want to connect with Timere and the National Agenda for Black Children, please opt in right now by clicking on that poll on your screen. Thank you for your participation. All right. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Currington, who is the creator of ACCESS, which stands for Assessing Classroom Sociocultural Equity Scale. ACCESS is an observation tool for measuring equitable social cultural interactions in early childhood classrooms. Let's hear from her.
Early learning is built upon relationships. We use measures to train teachers, assess classrooms, and even compensate programs based on the quality of these relationships. But what happens when those relationships are racially biased? Research shows white teachers report not being as emotionally connected to their Black or Latinx students, and that they have lower academic expectations for them. Other studies also show white teachers talk less to children of color, and that they are overly suspicious of Black children's behavior and dole out harsher punishments to children of color. These biased relationships result in children of color experiencing classroom interactions like this.
Stop!
I ain't doing nothing.
I'm not doing anything. And yes, you were. Get to the timeout chair. Now, please.
Our traditional classroom quality measures would rate the teacher as handling the situation appropriately. She didn't yell. She used polite language. She had a clearly defined consequence for misbehavior, the timeout chair. But traditional measures would fail to acknowledge how the teacher denigrated the Black boy's home language or how the white boy was the aggressor, yet he faced no consequences. Did you see the heartbreak on the Black boy's face? The teacher had already marked him, labeled him, profiled him. This happens every day in every classroom to every child of color. And that's why I developed Access, the first measure of racial equity in preschool classrooms. Access, aligned with professional development and coaching, can detect microaggressions and microassaults perpetrated by teachers or peers, power structures in the classroom related to race and ethnicity, and how children feel in the classroom and their opportunities to learn. I've launched a growing community of practice with colleagues from Oregon, California, and Delaware to design the technical assistance network, including PD, coaching, and assessment, to embed this measure of racial equity into Head Start, state, and local early childhood programs. Investments in Access can help early childhood leaders improve teachers' relationships with children of color, ensure disciplinary practices are fair and proactive, and teach children to be upstanders for social justice. I am grateful to the funders who have already invested in Access and in our community of practice. But to implement Access throughout state and local early childhood programs, I am seeking additional partners to join our growing community of practice and $1 million to build the core technical assistance team to embed Access into quality improvement systems. Please join our movement of leaders who refuse to wait any longer for a racially equitable early childhood system in which all children can thrive.
What a really powerful tool to help us advance equity in early childhood classrooms. I wish my children's teacher had this resource when they were in preschool. I remember a teacher calling my son aggressive when he was simply expressing his frustration when he didn't understand the lesson. This is another example of how microaggressions can show up for our Black and brown babies. You can help us change these experiences. If you want to help Dr. Currington and help to scale Access, please share your interest in the poll on your screen. Similar to Dr. Currington, our next presenter is focused on equipping teachers in the classroom with the tools and skills needed to advance anti-racist mindsets and practices. Let's hear from founder Daisy Hahn and her organization, Embracing Equity.
Hi, I'm Daisy Hahn, founder of Embracing Equity. And on what should have been an exciting first day of school, I remember my teacher pulling her eyes into slants, making goofy faces in a genuine attempt to comfort and humor me. We know that's not culturally competent. She didn't mean it, but it still hurt. And like so many teachers, she enacted harm even with the best of intentions. Fast forward to my first day as a Montessori teacher, and I found myself in a similar position, well-intentioned but ill-equipped. How could I provide something different without having experienced it myself? After 10 years of teaching, I went to graduate school to research and reflect. And there I learned that students of color in anti-racist learning environments have higher levels of success in school and beyond. They understand that the inequity they face is not caused by personal shortcomings, but rather is a systemic failure. And that failure happens nationally. Only 2 states require cultural competency training as part of teacher certification. And I was determined to disrupt this inequity. And so in 2017, I founded Embracing Equity to connect the inner change to the outer change for collective change. That's represented in individual learning, interpersonal actions, and institutional transformation. We focus on developing anti-racist mindsets and practices. Rather than teaching a toolkit, we say the tools are in you. We harness immersive virtual learning that moves anti-racism values into daily practice. And our programs are built from the ground up to be virtual, which allows us to be more scalable and more equitable. It's easier to access without travel or childcare. It's cheaper, and surprisingly, it's more effective. Our participants tell us that they find it easier to be more vulnerable online with us than in comparable in-person trainings. Our programs are delivered to teachers, school leaders, and educational organizations. We have virtual cohorts, 10 hours of synchronous facilitated anti-racism training. The Teaching for Equity microcredential is a self-paced course on actionable high-leverage practices. And the Leadership Residency is a year-long program that starts with an equity audit, sets organizational goals, and facilitates their implementation side by side with leaders. We've engaged over 2,000 participants, impacting over 200,000 children nationally. And it's working. Our graduates tell us that embracing equity was an inflection point in their lives. They're able to recognize racism when they encounter it and feel better equipped to do something about it. When people experience our program, they want more. We've grown from 260 participants a year to 910 driven by word of mouth, and we have a huge wait list. Embracing Equity is recognized as a leading anti-racism organization. We can serve the same or more participants we serve in a year through a single institutional partnership. Multiply that by the districts in the country, and our growth potential is off the charts. We can serve 1 million children over the next decade. And to get there, we need two things. One, help us secure institutional partners. And two, we need growth capital for partnership development and to train more trainers to grow our capacity. Will you join us in the movement to embrace equity? Let's get to work.
Wow, Daisy, I am truly inspired by your goal to reach 1 million children over the next decade. Can you imagine the impact embracing equity would have in the lives of our children? If you want to connect with Embracing Equity by introducing Daisy to institutional partners and or supporting their capacity to grow, please let us know by participating in the poll on your screen. As a reminder, connections can take many forms. You can follow up with direct support, you can follow up with the conversation, or learn more to provide feedback. All right, next we're going to hear from Miley Hadley from Zeno, who is advancing racial equity through the love of math. Let's hear from her.
Math is in every culture throughout history. Math is a life skill. Math is opportunity and an ancestral right. Hi, I'm Miley Hadley, Executive Director of Zeno, where we spark joy and inspire a love of math. Why, you ask? Because there's no such thing as a life lived without math. From environmental stewardship to software engineering, the economy of the future will continue to rely heavily on math skills, yet many adults hold shame and fear around math that close the door of opportunity, because math-phobic adults create math-phobic children. Math is opportunity, an opportunity that systemic racism combined with math phobia has stolen from many kids, more specifically kids of color. Fortunately, this is a problem we can solve. Zeno works at the intersection of race, place, language, and culture. This foundation opens doors to a variety of communities, from indigenous peoples who've lived on this land since time immemorial to recent refugees and everyone in between. We reach thousands of families annually by partnering with any organization that provides services to families with children ages 3 to 5. We start early because children who start strong in math stay strong in math. Our family engagement model includes Zeno game kits that are aligned to early math learning trajectories. Our games are published in 10 different languages and represent the races, ethnicities, and cultures of the families we reach. Beyond games, we engage parenting adults in their child's learning through family math events, coach educators on integrating math practices into existing services, and offer professional development sessions that connect math to literature, racial equity, social emotional learning, and more. We know one's belief about themselves and their abilities might be the greatest protection against the harms of systemic racism. This was my personal experience. I'm a math person. I loved math from a young age, and when I was being discouraged from math classes and STEM careers, I never stopped loving math or believing in my abilities. I became an engineer. Math is identity. Zeno creates conditions for positive math moments between and among educators, children, and parenting adults. Our impact is clear. Beyond grades and test scores, Zeno changes hearts and minds. Our surveys show twice as many families and partners strongly agree that they identify as a math person as a result of their work with Zeno. We know we have something special and we want to share it. Increasing our budget to $5 million will allow Zeno to deepen our work in Washington State and scale our programs and services to new collaborators nationwide. Please consider making a financial gift to support our expansion. In addition to financial gifts, we welcome introductions to key leaders in your community who want to join our math movement. Together, we can produce a more equitable and just world where every child and family is a doer and lover of math. Thank you.
Thank you, Miley, for your inspiring work. I really love your vision of a racially just world where every child and family is a doer and lover of math. If you want to connect with Zeno, now is your opportunity. Your poll should be up now.
Well, I really wish I had access to Zeno, embracing equity and access when I was teaching. I'm confident my classroom would have been an even more affirming space for my students and for myself. Next, let's shift to Dr. Juliana Meltzy, who will let us know how we as a field can better serve culturally and linguistically diverse children and families in a way that preserves cultural identity and protects from racism and discrimination.
Hi, I'm Juliana Meltzy, Associate Professor of Applied Psychology at New York University. My research focuses on Latina children's early development, examining the multiple ways that families, in particular Spanish-speaking immigrant families, support children's early language and math learning during the preschool years. What do you see? Is this glass half empty or half full? This image is often used to uncover your outlook in life. But today, I will use it to illustrate how the discipline views and talks about a large portion of U.S. children, those from culturally, racially, and linguistically diverse communities such as Latina children. The science that informs our educational practices and policy decisions views young Latina children and their families from a half-empty glass perspective. We focus on the empty space, on the skills children lack, the activities that parents don't do. We compare children's skill sets and family practices to standards developed from years of descriptive research with white English-speaking families. We rely on methods and measures informed by this research. We then design interventions to fill the empty space, disregarding what is already present. This approach not only reflects, but also perpetuates social and racial inequities. To build an equitable science, we need to shift our attention to the filled space of that glass, identifying children and families' assets. My research relies on this approach. In my latest work, for example, I examined the everyday math experiences of young bilingual Latina children in low-income communities. I studied family math talk. We know that family math talk supports the development of math concepts and vocabulary, key skills for future math learning. But most importantly, family math is also cultural, as it is embedded within culturally informed parenting practices and socialization goals. In our work, we deviated from traditional methods examining parent-child interactions during play. Rather than impose a white academic lens, we created a teaching task that reflected the everyday family experiences of Latina preschoolers and also respected the hierarchical nature of parent-child relationships in Latina families. Using this method, we found that math talk was frequent, especially talk about spatial relations, numbers, and quantities. With knowledge generated from research such as this one, which asks what is present, we can then design educational and intervention programs that build from cultural assets, using family practices as points of leverage to help young children reach their potential. So how can you help? I can think of two ways. First, partner with researchers whose work with culturally and linguistically diverse families and children broadens our understanding of what is normative. We need more descriptive work with families from culturally and linguistically diverse communities. We also need new tools and methods that reflect accurately the skills culturally and linguistically diverse children have and bring from home to school. Second, support the development of an educational curriculum that reflects children's cultural heritage and everyday experiences, and help develop a teaching workforce who is prepared to offer quality education to children from culturally and linguistically diverse communities. We need to transform the science and the system rather than change the children and the families. Together, we can disrupt the power hierarchies inherent in our research practices to build an inclusive science and transform our educational efforts.
It's always so great to hear Dr. Meltze's wisdom. If you'd like to connect with Dr. Meltze and help her advance her work with culturally and linguistically diverse families, please opt in to connect now via the poll on your screen. It is so good to see those connections rolling in. So a critical element in supporting culturally and linguistically diverse children and families is respecting and honoring their home language. Let's hear now from Dr. Alexandra Figueres-Daniel, who's developed a classroom PD tool that helps ensure dual language learners are equitably supported throughout the day.
Imagine Lily, a Spanish-speaking preschooler excited to be in school for the first time. While Lily's teacher does lively, engaging read-alouds, Lily doesn't understand any of the words and gazes out the window wondering when her mom will come. One day, in recognition that Lily is not engaged with the books, the teacher calls on her to tell the class what the weather is like for the day. Lily remains quiet, and the teacher moves on. What Lily doesn't know is that the assistant teacher, Miss D, in the back of the room speaks Spanish. For Lily, Miss D could be key in creating a completely different experience. Classrooms are rife with these missed opportunities. I'm Alexandra Figueres-Daniel, co-developer of the research tool Caseba, which has been profiled in publications like New America, and the professional development tool Caseba that supports both teachers and dual language learners, or DLLs. It focuses on the ways teachers can improve their practice to ensure DLLs like Lily are intentionally supported throughout the day. DLLs account for 33% of all children ages 5 and under in the U.S. Research has continually shown the benefits of supporting home language and English acquisition for this group's success. We regularly measure quality interactions and environment in early childhood with accountability systems like QRIS, but none focus on the specific practices that matter most for DLLs. Lack of this kind of data means that there are little to no ways to inform professional development and continuous improvement efforts, which, as can be noted in the story of Lily, can be detrimental for young DLLs. The Caseba is a classroom-based professional development tool that provides strategies for working with young DLLs, as well as a means for teachers to self-direct their development in an ongoing manner. Though designed for all teachers, the Caseba uniquely supports bilingual teachers like Miss D by drawing on their linguistic and cultural assets systematically and intentionally in a way that has not been possible before. Here's how it works. Caseba includes 6 key items clustered around 4 big ideas: supports for language and literacy development in both the home language and English, understanding the existing assets children and families possess, classroom environment and materials, and social emotional supports. Through video recordings and in-person observations, teachers and coaches self-identify practices and actions along each of these items that show either strengths or where improvement is needed. Then teachers and coaches discuss, plan, and implement new strategies. For example, in the case of Ms. D's, the language and literacy item of the CISEBA would have provided a strategy about doing pre-reads in Spanish to be supportive of Lily's understanding of the larger group readings in English. CISEBA builds on findings from recent research studies that showed how higher scores on the CISEBA were related to better outcomes for DLL children across various learning domains. What we need now is more widespread access to CISEBA, a professional development tool that is friendly and approachable for teachers and coaches to help spread these promising practices across the country. We are seeking funding to systematize and professionalize materials and training processes and partnerships for use in larger systems or research. Let's work to make sure students like Lily can thrive in their preschool classrooms and teachers like Ms. D are recognized for their cultural and linguistic assets. I'd love to tell you more, and thank you for listening.
If you'd like to help Alex scale the CISEBA to regions across the country and ensure teachers and administrators have access to training materials, please opt in to connect now. Next, join me in welcoming Aaron Griffin from the American Indian College Fund, who is advancing justice for Indigenous communities through partnerships with tribal colleges and universities. Let's hear about their work building pathways for Native educators trained in Indigenous early education.
Hamitakiapi, Aaron Griffin Amakiapi. I'm Aaron Griffin, and I'm the Program Officer for Indigenous Education at the American Indian College Fund. We've been helping Native students access tribal college education since 1989. In 2011, we realized we could not achieve our mission of transforming Indigenous communities without investing in early childhood education. Quality early childhood education is key to lifelong success, including college completion. In Native communities, quality means culturally competent Native educators engaging children and families in ways that incorporate our Indigenous worldview and understandings. But our communities lack pathways to early education careers. Without many more Native educators trained in Indigenous early education, we cannot deliver quality early childhood education to all Native children. We are partnering with tribal colleges and universities to build those pathways. The College Fund's Indigenous early childhood education programs provide resources, technical assistance, and professional development for Native communities to grow their own early childhood educators and programs of study. The centerpiece of our place-based programming approach involves the intergenerational transfer of knowledge through the integration of Native language and culture. From there, each tribal college starts from the entry point that best fits their community. These include our Indigenous early childhood education domains of teacher quality and instruction, family and community engagement, child developmental skills, and transitions from pre-K through elementary school. Through the support of the College Fund, our tribal college partners choose one of these entry points and are then able to develop Indigenous approaches and models that build and strengthen early childhood education programming. This support is creating transformative change in supporting language revitalization. Take Salish Kootenai College, a tribal college in Montana. The integration of culture and language into the content of STEM courses in their early childhood education programs was facilitated through community and family engagement and early learning partnerships. SKC has since used this model to integrate language and culture into all of their teacher education program STEM courses. The College Fund has awarded $6.3 million across 10 tribal colleges in 9 states to support these initiatives. Our funding is uniquely flexible. It allows our tribal college partners to re-envision early childhood systems and prioritize Indigenous values and knowledge. Over time, we aim to increase the number of Native students entering and graduating from Indigenous early childhood education programs. each of whom has the potential to impact thousands of young children and their families. Our strategic plan lays out a goal to reach 25 tribal colleges and an additional 10,000 children in the next 5 years. We seek $11 million to help us launch this plan. Join us in creating systems where all Indigenous children, educators, and communities can thrive. Wopida tanka e chichiapi, owasina na pe chiusapi, henana pekte.
Thank you, Aaron. If you want to ensure Native students receive quality tribal education from culturally competent Native educators that incorporates their worldview and understanding, please opt in to connect via the poll now. Now, as a reminder, today's event is all about connections, and it can take a number of forms. It can be following up with direct support on asks, as simple as a follow-up conversation to learn more or provide feedback. So please continue to use these polls like the one up on your screen now to connect with these incredible presenters. In that vein, we are hosting a funder-only show and tell debrief on August 17th, where we'll discuss the issues and presentations from across the Show and Tell Equity and Justice series. And you can let us know your interest in that event via this poll right now. I also want to give a quick plug for the Innovation Glossary. We know that there are so many additional topics we could cover on the topic of equity and justice in ECE. And our Innovation Glossary has many more organizations in our network that are advancing equity and justice in early childhood, like Healthy Hip Hop and Ad Astra Media, both of which leverage culturally relevant entertainment to promote early learning. And of course, Choquette's Rise Child Development Center, which, as she mentioned earlier, is built upon anti-racist principles.
Thanks, Vance, for that shout out. Next, we're going to continue on. We'll hear from two ventures focused on inequitable pay for child care workers, a topic that is very near and dear to me. It is one of the reasons I created Rise. It was to find a way to pay our teachers and staff a comfortable living wage. Our plan to increase wages is to use a profit share model. Let's hear about some other innovative solutions. And we're going to start with Dr. Leah Austin, who is the director of the Center for the Study of Child Care Employment.
I'm Leah Austin, Director of the Center for the Study of Child Care Employment at the University of California, Berkeley. Here at the center, our mission is to improve the status and well-being of the early care and education workforce through research, policy development, and prioritizing the experiences of educators themselves. Every week, our groundbreaking research is cited by policymakers, journalists, and advocates, including, for example, Senator Warren's recent letter to Congress on childcare infrastructure, which cited us numerous times. Every day across the country, though, early educators are leaving their jobs for the same reason: low pay and poor working conditions. Before the pandemic, they were struggling, with childcare workers earning an average of just $11.65 an hour. Even in high-cost states like California, where I live, the average pay is under $15 an hour, driving educators to leave and earn more at places like Target, Amazon, and McDonald's. Parents, businesses, and children are then left in the lurch. The economy can't work unless childcare works, and childcare can't work without its teachers. COVID forced people to understand that childcare is essential, bringing more attention and funding than we've seen in decades. Yet the women who are the backbone of childcare too often remain invisible and unsupported. Through our research, we know that 97% of educators identify as women and about 40% are persons of color. And for generation after generation, the historic undervaluing and underpayment of their labor has been the result of our nation's early care and education policies. In our biennial Early Childhood Workforce Index and related research, we've identified key and really often troubling features of early education employment. For example, 98% of other occupations in this country are paid more than childcare workers. This workforce is experiencing poverty at rates that are on average 8 times higher than that of their K-8 counterparts. In no state do the average wages of early educators meet the living wage for one adult with just one child. And there are troubling racial inequities in job opportunities and pay. Latina educators, we know, are overrepresented in assistant teaching roles, which pay lower wages. and Black educators are systematically paid less than their peers, to the tune of 78 cents less per hour. And it's under these conditions that educators entered the pandemic. And while relief has come, it was a full year before the first substantial round of funding for the sector was available. And for many, that was just too late. Since March of 2020, more than 135 jobs in the sector have been lost. Thousands of spaces for young children have been lost, and childcare programs that are trying to open or expand are having trouble staffing up. If we want a stable and effective childcare system, we must invest in the women who have held this system together and transform early childhood jobs into good jobs for them. Here at the center, we have spent the last 22 years keeping a spotlight on the unacknowledged labor of childcare workers. Policy leaders, for example, the Democratic Women's Caucus and the Department of Education, state administrators, and many others have relied on our data and analysis to inform their perspectives and policies. We have led the sector in workforce-centered research and remain the only national center whose mission is solely focused on the conditions of early educators. Our seminal 2014 report, Worthy Work, Still Unlivable Wages, served as a tipping point for advocates and policymakers to call for reform. And our policy recommendations in the time of COVID have been among our most accessed resources. We seek support for our national and multi-state research, especially future editions of the Workforce Index, which our federal and state governments are using now to shape their childcare policy. And future editions of the index will tell us how we're progressing and also where we're falling short. And it will continue to identify policies for a system that works for children, for families, and works for educators. We are a small but highly effective organization. With only 18 staff members, we've made a real impact nationally and across states. Yet there is much more to do. And we're at a turning point. There is no going back to pre-2020 conditions to mend the early care and education system we once had. That system was built on the backs of millions of women providing the services and the poverty level wages paid to them. So we're seeking funding for the next iteration of the Workforce Index, as well as additional staff to strengthen our capacity. And your support will enable us to continue to be leaders in documenting and shaping how our nation prepares, supports, and compensates our early care and education workforce. I invite you and encourage you to come and meet with us and learn more about the breadth and depth of our work. Thank you.
Thank you for your important work, Dr. Austin. If you'd like to support the Center for the Study of Child Care Employment in their work documenting and advocating for adequate compensation and working conditions for the ECE workforce, you can opt in now at the poll on your screen. Thanks so much for your participation. I see those connections rolling in. Thank you. Next up, we have ESEPS, an organization known for their early care and education apprenticeship program. Executive Director, Dr. Randy Wolf, is going to share more about it.
I'm Randy Wolf, Executive Director of ESEPS, Early Care and Education Pathways to Success. We're known for our trailblazing work with apprenticeships in California. Nationally, the ECE workforce is comprised of over 1 million workers. They are almost entirely female and largely women of color, immigrants, and working mothers. Despite the long-term impact of early education, poor wages and low-paid career pathways have held back the industry for decades. In 2019, ECE workers nationally earned an average hourly wage of $13.43, and early educators in California faced a poverty rate of 17%. ESEPS approaches these inequities through the lens of workforce development, promoting the apprenticeship model because of its proven record of success in other fields. Apprenticeship is particularly well suited to the field of ECE because teacher quality is the essential component to successful early education, and developing workers' skills, knowledge, and competencies is the essential focus of apprenticeship. So high-quality apprenticeships lead to high-quality teachers. Through our programs, apprentices complete 2,000 hours of paid on-the-job training, earn no-cost college degrees and teaching permits, receive steadily increasing wages, and are assured of a job upon graduation. But we understand that apprenticeships alone cannot solve the economic conundrums facing the industry. So our work falls into 3 buckets: creating and expanding apprenticeships for the ECE workforce, field building to elevate the ECE industry as a workforce development priority, and advocacy to promote family-sustaining wages and well-paid ECE career pathways. Over the past 5 years, we've proven the viability and potential of ECE apprenticeships. We've engaged more than 400 participants, we partner with 15 community colleges, and sponsor 18 apprenticeship partnerships across 9 counties, including 3 locations in Los Angeles County. So what's next? It's time for ESEPS to go national. Why? Because the impact of the pandemic, the current political landscape, and the expansion of universal preschool have created a rare opportunity to make real progress. By expanding apprenticeships, we'll contribute to building stronger career pathways, increasing wages across the field, ensuring a robust childcare infrastructure for working parents, and gaining recognition of ECE as an essential industry. And what are the next steps? First, we'll begin by replicating ECE apprenticeships on a broader scale. We're already working with Kentucky, and we're in contact with folks in Illinois, Oregon, Texas, and Wisconsin. Early next year, we'll host Seize the Moment, the first ever national conference on ECE apprenticeships. And we'll publish the ESEPS Manual, a state-of-the-art blueprint for advancing this work. ESEPS has been built upon a foundation of deep expertise and frontline experience. We've established our proof of concept in California, and we're poised to influence the field nationally. Now, we need visionary funding partners who can keep up with us and propel the work forward. We're expanding staff, developing groundbreaking models and materials, and building a national coalition of stakeholders. Now we need your help to fully meet the moment. We'd welcome the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you, Dr. Wolf. I really love what you're doing in California, and I'm really excited by your plans to take ESEPS national. I've already shared how much this topic means to me. If you can help ESEPS with an introduction or connection, please click yes on the poll below. Thanks so much for connecting. Next, we'll hear from Pilar Torres. She is the president of Luna Latinas Unidas that focuses on supporting the unique licensing and professional development for Latina home-based care providers and to build the childcare supply in underserved communities. Let's hear more about it.
We're facing a national childcare supply crisis that impacts some communities more than others. Even before the pandemic, 57% of Latino families lived in childcare deserts. Without licensed childcare, working families cannot benefit from childcare subsidies, and childcare providers are not eligible for many crucial supports. Nationally, Latinas represent 25% of the home-based workforce, and in some states, much more. This does not account for the hundreds of thousands of informal providers that are an essential source of childcare in underserved communities. Yet many early childhood systems don't know how to effectively serve Latina caregivers or reach the children they serve. Licensing is a complicated process with many hurdles, especially for English learners. I am Pilar Torres, president of Luna Latinas Unidas. Luna leverages 20 years of experience to reach and support the unique licensing and professional development needs of Latina home-based educators and to build childcare supply in underserved communities. Escaleras, Luna's flagship program, is an off-the-shelf, state-approved package of e-learning modules and coaching that accelerates native Spanish speakers through licensing, allowing them to quickly open childcare slots in their communities. Our suite of services offers a clear pathway to licensing and ongoing support to help childcare providers succeed as educators and entrepreneurs. Our material is culturally relevant, delivered in native Spanish, and intentionally increases digital literacy levels. Escaleras is implemented in partnership with state and local professional development organizations, including CCR&Rs, community development hubs, and more. We work with these partners to recruit and train 3 cohorts of 30 providers per year for 3 years. For 2021-2022, our goal is to launch 3 Escalera pilots in 3 states, creating more than 1,300 new childcare slots. Escalera successfully implemented a proof of concept in Philadelphia with a cohort of 12 providers who previously had no path to licensure. Escaleras also won first prize of the pilot track of the Harvard Science Innovation Challenge. Beyond licensing, Luna curates a virtual community of practice that offers resources and support to build quality and sustainability. With Luna's scalable platform over time, we have the potential to reach hundreds of thousands of Latina providers, strengthening profitable microenterprises for immigrant women while increasing access to quality care in underserved communities. Luna community members will close equity gaps faced by millions of young dual language learners, the fastest growing population in our nation. We're seeking community partners who want to address equity among Latino children and providers in their community. We're also asking for $200,000 in startup capital to build our strategies for growth. Please connect with Luna and join us in building a more just early care and education system for all children and providers.
Thank you, Pilar. I am really inspired by your work to directly address the lack of high quality care options for families. If you're interested in supporting Luna, please let us know now by participating in the poll on your screen.
Next, we'll shift to innovative 2-gen solutions. First up is Avance, who have been authentically supporting Latina families for decades. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Teresa Granillo as she tells us about Avance's 2-gen system of opportunity that addresses the systemic inequities facing Latina families.
For over 47 years, Avance has been implementing a unique 2-generation model that centers equity in early childhood education and parent education. We meet our families where they are and address the systemic inequities they face. We provide culturally responsive programming that equips low-income Latinx parents to be their child's first teachers at home and empowers them to be leaders in their communities. Our core program, the Parent-Child Education Program, provides a safe space for our parents to build the skills, confidence, and social support that not only benefits themselves, but also their children. By participating in Avance, parents know what's next for their children. They're more likely to enter school ready, which sets them on a path for educational success and long-term economic mobility. But the number one question parents ask at graduation is, what's next for me? For some, the skills and resources provided through our Parent-Child Education Program help them to go back into the workforce and further their education. For too many of our parents, their goals of furthering their education and increasing their economic mobility are harder to achieve given the systemic inequities in access to quality childcare, workforce opportunities, and affordable education. What if we could address all these barriers at the same time by bringing early childhood organizations, institutions of higher education, and workforce boards together? This type of collaboration, what we are calling the 2-gen ecosystem of opportunity, may be the model that could end intergenerational poverty in Latinx communities across the nation. We are testing this innovative model in El Paso, Texas this fall. With the financial support from the Workforce Board, Avance will be training El Paso Community College staff to deliver the Parent-Child Education Program on campus to local parents. In addition to supporting the curriculum implementation, Workforce Borderplex is also ensuring that parent participants receive free childcare on campus and scholarships to enroll in El Paso Community College or a workforce training program. With this model, when a parent asks, what's next after they complete the Parent-Child Education Program, a college counselor will walk them directly to the admissions office. And when they say they need childcare, the college will enroll their children in the on-campus childcare program. Our pilot in El Paso launches in the fall, and we already have a wait list of parents who are wanting to participate. We also have additional interested institutions of higher education, Alamo Colleges in San Antonio, and the Texas A&M system that has campuses across the state. Our goal is to scale this program to reach 1,400 families over the next 4 years. We have the relationships with institutions of higher education and local workforce boards. We just need the $300,000 of philanthropic support to fully fund the El Paso pilot and launch partnerships with Alamo Colleges and Texas A&M. With your philanthropic support, we can scale the 2-gen ecosystem of opportunity to ensure that Latinx families in Texas have access to the opportunities to increase their economic mobility from cradle to career.
Wow, what a comprehensive approach to addressing systemic inequities facing Latinx families. Thank you, Dr. Granillo. If you can help support Avance as they scale the two-gen system of opportunity, please opt in to connecting via the poll on your screen now. I see those connections rolling in. A few people can make introductions. Awesome. Now let's turn to Tara Villanueva from House of Ruth, an organization that helps women and children overcome homelessness and domestic violence. Let's hear from Tara now about their free trauma-informed childcare program, KidSpace.
Hi, I'm Tara Villanueva, Center Director at House of Ruth's KidSpace. When Malika arrived at KidSpace as a 2-year-old, she was wordless. She refused to speak. Like many of our clients, her delay was not medical, but emotional. After months of building trust between staff, Malika, and her mom, she now runs, plays, and shouts loudly, just like other children her age. KidSpace is a free, high-quality, trauma-informed childcare center for children ages 6 weeks to 5 years. This is a key program of the House of Ruth in Washington, D.C., an organization that helps women and children overcome domestic violence, homelessness, and other traumas. Due to systemic and institutional racism, 99% of the clients we serve at House of Ruth and KidSpace are Black. In 2017, under the leadership of Sandra Jackson, we embarked on a 3-year campaign to build an entirely new facility for our KidSpace children that reflects the high quality of the services performed inside. KidSpace helps hundreds of children each year catch up or surpass their same-age peers. From well-trained teachers to speech and occupational therapy, we are highly skilled at reaching children who have experienced trauma. Last year, 82% of children we served at KidSpace met or exceeded their developmental milestones. But some children need more than we can provide. Early childhood traumas can negatively impact a child for decades. To counteract this, they need therapeutic interventions. But research shows that these interventions only have an impact on very young children when their caregivers also participate. Our children and families need access to transformative therapy, but they live in a therapy desert. There's no close access. The new KidSpace building was designed with this in mind and contains 4 specially built therapy rooms. And we've been lucky enough to find a partner in Georgetown University and MedStar Health who will commit to bringing culturally sensitive therapies to children and caregivers right here at KidSpace. And since it is important to us that our families work with therapists who look like them, we especially value that this partnership will mean that our families, who are 99% Black, will get to see Black therapists. But to fund these Break the Trauma Cycle interventions, we need $1 million to offer 3 years of therapy with psychologists and psychiatrists from Georgetown. This is a first-of-its-kind partnership, a model for childcare centers nationwide. When young children experience trauma, they have very little agency to change their lives. We, however, can. The main thing we need, that Malika needs, is your support. When I started at KidSpace as a volunteer, I had no way of knowing how vital the work is. 25 years later, I know that our investments in children and their parents work. I need you to take the next step and fund these important therapeutic interventions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Providing two-gen transformative therapy for Black children and their parents by Black therapists is such important work. If you'd like to support Tara and House of Ruth in ensuring this is a reality for their community, please opt in via the poll on your screens now. So we know that pediatricians can play a critical role in advancing equity and justice in early childhood, given how they have near universal access to children and families. I'm excited now to introduce Rahel Briggs, Executive Director of Healthy Steps, and hear from her about Healthy Steps' innovative early intervention pediatric program, that has the potential to transform the lives of our youngest community members.
Hi, I'm Rahil Briggs, the National Director of Healthy Steps. Healthy Steps integrates an early childhood development expert into pediatrics, and this new team member supports screening, intervention, and referrals to needed services, from autism to maternal depression to social determinants of health. Over 25 years, our program has emerged as a leader with significant demonstrated impact across 2 generations and a commitment to closing health equity gaps. The pandemic has made glaringly clear that health equity is a huge problem in this country, and it starts with babies. While 1 in 5 babies are born to families living below the poverty line, that is doubled and tripled respectively for Hispanic and Black families. Early adversities literally get under the skin, changing brains and bodies potentially for a lifetime. We need to reach babies during this most critical period of brain development, birth to 3, in the single system with the capacity to reach them, pediatrics. Prevention is the key to closing these gaps. Our early childhood system is siloed, home visiting, pre-K. None are scaled anywhere near pediatrics. Pediatric visits alone aren't enough, but the system must be at the center of our approach to influence collective prosperity and flourishing. Let's look at one site doing groundbreaking work, closing equity gaps in the most disadvantaged neighborhood in our nation's capital. Healthy Steps at Children's National Medical Center reaches over 4,500 families annually, the majority of whom identify as Black, and the Healthy Steps team reflects the racial and ethnic backgrounds of these patients, building trusted relationships that ensure universal screenings, in-house intervention, and effective follow-up to needed community services like early intervention. Racism persists in our education and health systems, and families understandably refuse referrals for fear of tracking their children into dead-end paths. Healthy Steps transforms these paths. Randall Baylor, a Healthy Steps team member, DC native, and parent in the community, works to rebuild trust, answer questions, and ensure children receive these trajectory-changing services. Healthy Steps in DC quadruples the likelihood of successful early intervention referrals, and children receive the needed developmental services to set them on the path for school success. And that's just one example of many. We currently serve more than 300,000 babies and families in 190 communities, and we've grown an average 17% year over year, outstripping our projected 5% growth. Imagine the future if every family had access to Healthy Steps, if every practice had a Randall, with an ongoing cost as low as $5 per family per month. We ask for additional funding to support this remarkable demand and help us transform the lives of children and families and close racial equity gaps that otherwise persist across healthcare and across this country. Thank you.
Wow, such an innovative approach to early intervention in pediatrics. If you'd like to ensure more families across the country have access to Healthy Steps, please opt in to connect with them now. Great to see those connections rolling in. So Ioma and Simare mentioned at the beginning of the presentation today that a key element of the national agenda for Black children was protecting Black children from racism and discrimination. One of the clearest ways that this shows up in early care and education is through unjust disciplinary practices such as expulsions and suspensions in childcare and preschool classrooms. So I'm ecstatic now to bring in Tina Sloan, the Vice President of Early Childhood Mental Health Consultations at Cadango, based in the Bay Area, California, and Dr. Walter Gilliam, Director of the Edward Ziegler Center in Child Development and Social Policy from Yale University, to talk with them about ending unjust disciplinary practices through both policy and practice. So Walter, Tina, tell us, why is ending unjust disciplinary practices in early childhood education such an important equity and justice issue?
Well, first off, hey, Vance, and hey, my friend Tina. It's great to see you both.
Hello, hello.
Wonderful to see you.
Yeah, Tina, would you like to go first, or you want me to jump in on
I'll let you jump in.
Okay, I'll do it. So we did a study back in 2005, and we had found that children were being expelled, kicked out of preschool programs. 3 and 4-year-old babies kicked out of preschool programs at a rate more than 3 times that of grades K through 12 combined. And when you look at childcare programs out in the community outside of the public schools, it's about 13 times that of grades K through 12. And it's not even just preschoolers. We're also talking about infants and toddlers kicked out of infant toddler programs. Can you imagine starting your educational career at 3 or 4 years old or even younger by being kicked out of school before you even get to school? You know, we're talking about preschool, kicked out of school before you even get to school itself. And the message that sends to kids, I mean, one, the first thing that it does is it denies children the opportunity for all of the good things that can come from early care and education. But the other thing that it does too is it defines their relationship to school at the very beginning of the relationship to school, as this is not necessarily a place where my needs are going to be met, where people want to do the best for me. And it also can, in many cases, hide children who might actually need services, because what we're doing is we're just kicking them out of one program and into another program and into yet another program. What if instead of kicking kids out of preschool programs from one program to the next until they land in a mental health clinic, what if instead we kick the mental health clinicians out of their clinics and put them in preschool programs where they can actually do some kind of good in order to hopefully be able to prevent children being expelled from preschool programs? When you look at just the sheer number of kids being kicked out of preschool programs, you could fill every single seat at where the Giants play football in New York City, where the Yankees play baseball, and where the Mets play baseball. And you still have 13,000 preschoolers standing in the parking lot. That's how many kids we kick out of preschool programs every day. And it is disproportionately our Black children, disproportionately our boys, and especially disproportionately our Black boys.
I second everything that my friend and colleague Walter has said so passionately and profoundly. This is a pinnacle issue for the ECE field. We must do what is right and just, take continued, sustained action to change the conditions that allow our young children of color to be denied access to the system that is supposed to propel their potential, not thwart it.
Right.
I'm so glad that you mentioned just. I know that I wasn't necessarily planning on mentioning this, but because you used the word just, it reminds me of this fact. We have built the whole field of early care and education largely on the basis of 3 studies: the Perry Preschool Study in Ypsilanti, Michigan, the Abecedarian Study in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and the Chicago Child Parent Center Study, because those have cost-benefit analyses that allow us to say that every dollar that goes into the programs yields back societal savings. But we often forget the fact that the Perry Preschool Study in Ypsilanti, Michigan, the most widely cited study to make the case for early care and education, was 123 children, and every one of them were Black. And the Abecedarian Study, 98% Black. And the Chicago Child Parent Centers, 93% Black. What we're doing every year is we're taking data from our Black children, our Black communities and families, and using it to create a program for the benefit of all children. And then when no one's paying attention, disproportionately kicking out the back door the children, families, and communities who gave us the data in the first place. Right. That's what we're doing.
Right. Wow. Very powerful. And Tina, maybe I'll pass this to you. Why is legislation so important here?
Yeah.
What does it do?
Absolutely, Vance. Legislation is one important component to addressing the disproportionate practice of suspensions and expulsions. Legislation can ban these practices that simply need to stop. In ECE, there needs to be legislation that defines unjust and unacceptable suspension and expulsion practices, makes them unlawful, and prohibits them. Legislation can also create accountability measures so there are checks and balances on these practices. In ECE, legislation can set up data reporting protocols around suspension and expulsions for programs, as well as establish a path of recourse for families who have a child expelled. Legislation is essential, Vance, but not sufficient alone. Legislation alone does not change the use of damaging practices. These must There must be ongoing, comprehensive, and transformative supports to programs that disrupt the path that leads to unjust discipline, but then needs to create a restorative path where children, families, and teachers thrive. Walter, what would you like to add?
Well, I first off, I would like to say I agree with everything that you're saying, as I always do, Tina, when we have these kind of conversations. But aside from that, the part of the challenge with preschool expulsion is that nobody's proud of it, and they shouldn't be proud of it. You know, I've never heard of a preschool teacher who was glad that she was kicking kids out of preschool programs. I mean, as a matter of fact, I've met many that cry about it. They're really, truly upset about it. They do it because they don't know what else to do, because we are not providing them the supports they need in order to be able to make different decisions. And you'll never see a car driving down the road with a bumper sticker that says proud parent of an expelled preschooler, you know, because nobody's proud of this. And so as a result, we hush it up. And as a result of that, children suffer in silence. And that's why we need to be able to come up with efficient models like what you're doing there at Cadango to be able to stop this.
Awesome. Walter, you teed it up perfectly. So Tina, why don't you tell us about what you're doing at Cadango, this more holistic approach that marries policy and practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when we were able to provide effective models of early childhood mental health consultation, practice is enhanced and it even can be transformed. Early childhood mental health consultation builds teachers' overall capacity to be more responsive, sensitive, and attuned to all children, to all families, and even with each other in the classroom. Relationships are made stronger, collaboration is better, communication is improved. Now, consultants join teachers when there are challenges as well, especially with behaviors in the classroom. The consultant helps to equip the teacher with knowledge and information to better understand how to support the children that they struggle with, and to help them identify and implement interventions that serve to improve their ability to engage with them and to improve the outcomes for these children. Now, consultation also supports teachers with the stress and strain inherent in this very important role. A calmer teacher is a better teacher. Therefore, early childhood mental health consultation improves the interactions and the well-being for both adults and children in the ECE setting. Now, in addition to delivering consultation work, Cadango also engages in policy and advocacy. In California, we have passed 2 bills and are working on passing several others. One bill, AB 752, passed a few years back, banned expulsion in California in state-funded programs. The second bill we passed, AB 2698, allowed early childhood mental health consultation to be a reimbursable service, thus creating new access to consultation for programs in California. Now, we're not done. We're also working to pass additional legislation in California that defines unjust suspensions and expulsions in ECE, defines the early childhood mental health consultation workforce and training requirements for that workforce, and establishes Walter's Child Classroom Mental Health Climate Observation Tool as an integral aspect of elevating classroom practice. Walter, would you please tell us more about that wonderful child tool that we're using at Cadango and the exciting findings from the Ohio study?
Sure, glad to do so, but not until I say, you know, I've seen up close the stuff that's happening at Cadango, and it's just absolutely spectacular. And the work that you're doing is just, you know, really a role model to the rest of the nation. And what's even better about it is that you're not just being a role model, you're actually moving legislation to make it possible for other people to follow. So, you know, just applause for you. So the child measure is a measure that we've created where it's useful for mental health consultants when they're going into classrooms. But what it does is it embeds into the measure equity. You cannot score high on any item unless you're doing it equitably. It focuses a lot on the way in which the teachers pay attention to each and every child. Oftentimes in the past, I would say all children, and I've hence come to understand that when I say all children, many people think you mean the majority of kids. And as long as we're only interested in what's happening to the majority of the children, we are missing the point on equity, because equity is about what happens to each and every child. And so you can't really score high on any item on the child until you're doing that in some kind of an equitable way, paying attention to the needs of each and every child with cultural humility that's embedded into the measure in a way that makes it hard for you to not pay attention to those sorts of things. In terms of the Ohio study, well, I'll first start off by saying we did my colleague and I, Chin Reyes at Yale, did a study back in 2016 in Connecticut, where we found that mental health consultation in a statewide random controlled trial, randomly assigned, very rigorous, randomly assigning people to either get the mental health consultant or to wait 3 months for the mental health consultant. We found significant improvements in the teachers' ratings of the children's behaviors just in 3 months. And in Ohio, in the study that Dr. Reyes led, we threw a twist in. And in that study, we didn't just look at improvements in the children who prompted the request for the mental health consultant, but we also looked for improvements in the other children too, the bystanders who just happened to be in the classroom. And guess what we found? Not only was there significant improvement for the children who prompted the request for the service, but all the children benefited. And that's incredibly important to us because of this. We will never have enough mental health providers to help every single child who needs it, one child at a time. We need to be able to have models that are efficient, that leave behind benefits for every single child in order for us to ever possibly be able to get ahead of this. I see somebody say that they would like more information on the Ohio study, and I'm happy to get it to you in whatever way you, Vance, tell me we can do that to get that information to them. But we need to be able to have ways to be able to do this incredibly efficiently, because the sibling for equity is effectiveness and efficiency. If it's not effective, then it ain't helping. And if it's not efficient, then I can tell you up front who's going to get it and who's not. We need to have efficient models so that we can make sure that each and every program and child and community who needs it can get access.
Awesome. Thank you, Walter. Thank you, Tina. Tina, I know maybe you were working on something related to this. So how can people support you in that?
Yes, very exciting happenings. We are starting a new venture focused on expanding early childhood mental health consultation across California and beyond. So we are looking for strategic funders, thought leaders, and planning partners to support our launch. So I'd love to connect with those who are interested.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I know we're a little bit over time, so thank you, Tina. Thank you, Walter. Thank you to everybody else who's staying over, and always great talking to you. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, friends.
So Tina mentioned her new venture, so would love to see if people, if you want to support Tina in launching that venture, expanding early childhood mental health consultations, please opt in now via the poll.
Wow, Vance, this has been such an incredible show and tell. We reflected on care and education at the earliest stages that advance racial equity, racial justice, and liberation. We heard about centering cultural traditions, celebrating linguistic differences, as well as developing anti-racist educators, the power of early intervention, and a call to end unjust disciplinary practices in ECE. We talked about a topic that is very important to me and RISE, which is the equitable compensation for our ECE workforce. We know this is only a slice of the innovation that is happening in this area. So we welcome connections to more programs and experts doing great work in this field.
Absolutely. And thanks again to our incredible co-hosts and partners. And of course, thanks to our extraordinary speakers from today who began this journey to prepare for you months ago and who look forward to speaking with you soon. Now that you've cracked open that door of collaboration a little bit further, you may be wondering what comes next. You'll get an email with more information, including contact info for every venture you opted in to connect with today. And the ventures will also receive your contact information, and they have plans to reach out to you. You do not need to wait to hear from them. If you have feedback, a question, an idea, you can reach out directly to those ventures. If you see potential for collaboration, schedule time for a one-on-one to talk more.
I hope you are leaving today inspired, as I am, by the incredible work taking place across the field. And I hope that you also see this as a moment, as a call to action to drive continued innovation in early care and education. We must all come together to give families and the young children the support they deserve. Thank you again. Take care and stay safe out there.